All right, this has been it's been a little while. It's good to be here and see everybody here. And how's everyone doing? How are you? How are you? Vishen. All right. Okay, we have a special live. So I want to welcome everybody to a live episode. Let me get situated here. I haven't done a live in quite a few weeks. And a little bit of an echo. Okay. I want to say hi to everybody who's joining us on this Instagram live. I am excited to have a guest on, a dear friend. We've been friends for over a decade. Wow, it's like a different lifetime ago. And so this is going to be a live podcast episode. And I want to make sure my audio is good here. And so I hope everybody is well, that you are safe, sanitized, and strong. And the question, with Kwik Brain, we always open up with a question. And the question we are going to ask our guest today is, how do you become extraordinary at work? How do you become extraordinary? How do you be extraordinary at work? Because we spend upwards of 70% of our waking time at work. Mm-hmm. And so how can you do it in an extraordinary way? And so I'm very fortunate to have on with us in this live podcast a good friend, founder of Mindvalley, New York Times bestselling author, Vishen Lakhiani. Vishen, my friend, how are you?
Hey, Jim. It is so great to be back on your podcast again, and this time on Instagram Live.
We're going to turn this into a live podcast. So I think everyone's in for a real treat. And right now, Vishen is you're live in Kuala Lumpur.
I'm live in Malaysia, and you're in New York, right?
We are, in New York right now.
Right.
So let's get into this. Congratulations on your new book that
Absolutely.
This week.
The new book, The Buddha and the Badass.
That is quite a title. So let's get into this a little bit. Well, let's talk about these archetypes for everybody that's listening and watching. What are these archetypes and how do they relate to being extraordinary at work?
Absolutely. So The Buddha and the Badass, as the name suggests, is about two archetypes that is in all of us. Everyone who wants to do good things in the world, change the world, do great in their career, build the next business, have, in a sense, both these archetypes in them. But they tend to only listen to one, the badass. The badass is the disruptor, the creator. The badass is the person who doesn't embrace the status quo. The badass seeks to change the status quo. The badass are the people who are protesting in the streets for change. The badasses are the entrepreneurs building new products that can change the world. But the problem with badasses today is that many of them fail to recognize that within them is also the Buddha. Now, the Buddha here is not, I'm not in any way talking about Buddhism. And I know there are two Asian men on screen, so you may think this book has some touches of Eastern philosophy. No, it's actually inspired by spiritual sages across all cultures, across all years, in a sense where we all are made of the same stuff. The same spirit that we would see in the great saints and sages is also within us. And the Buddha and the Badass is about bringing that core of our humanness into work. And people forget that. People completely forget that we have a spiritual core that can be applied more than just our personal lives, but into our careers, our projects, how we run a meeting, how we set goals, how we build a company, how we make money. And the Buddha and the Badass explores that. It's an unusual book because it's spiritual and business merged together. And that's what this book is really about.
If you're just joining us right now on Instagram, I have a dear friend, Vishen Lakhiani, founder of Mindvalley, New York Times bestselling author. We're talking about his brand new book, The Buddha and the Badass. And so these archetypes, as you define them, how somebody's watching this right now, they want to be more extraordinary and they want to embrace these archetypes. Where do they start?
Okay, well, first, you want to think of this. You want to think of a little matrix, right? So as I built up Mindvalley, and by the way, for those of you who don't know, Jim is the single biggest author in Mindvalley right now. with his program Superbrain and Super Reading. He is the biggest author in our entire publishing company. So a company has around 400 people in it, if you count employees and contractors. It's a 400-person company, and it's a very complex piece of machinery. Now, when I show up in that company, I want to be able to do my job as the founder, as the CEO, without breaking, without getting stressed. The fact is, most people who are building companies go through extreme stress. Most people who are trying to succeed in their jobs, especially during this time, you have to deal with so much complexity, so much stress, so much uncertainty. Now, when you bring that Buddha into your life, a couple of things happen. The first thing that happens is that life seems to flow with ease. Many great spiritual teachers say that you know how to tell if someone is spiritual? It's not that they have a halo around their head. It's that their life is easy. It's as if they've tapped into magic. And what happens is that their life is easy for two reasons. The first reason is that they are fueled by intuition. We all have this. Our brains, our minds, is able to connect to an unknown yet wider source to feed us information. Now, this isn't theory anymore. This has been proven. For example, Professor John Michalowski at the Newark College of Engineering proved that you can test people for intuition, and CEOs who score higher in intuition tests actually create more profitability for their company. It's an amazing study. And Edinburgh, the University of Edinburgh, showed that just among average people, intuition can take the odds of a guess from 25% standard probability to 33%. Now, those things sound mild, but when you apply them to your work, whether you're writing a book or you're building a company where you got to make countless decisions a day, what if more of your decisions were correct? What if more of your decisions were on point? But also, what if more of your decisions were coming from a higher source? Now, many people don't really do this, but this is now blowing up in Silicon Valley. You know, Jim, our fellow friend, John Butcher, and you know John, he's a Mind Valley author. He's a phenomenal entrepreneur. John, for example, was talking about plant medicine, and he said today, any CEO who is not using plant medicine to tap into their intuition is at a strategic disadvantage. Now, John, of course, is talking about plant medicine. I talk about meditation, but both do the same thing. They're letting you tap into altered states to source ideas. Do you know, for example, Jim, I have a new app coming out for Mind Valley, but that entire app didn't come from a business meeting. It came when I was going through meditation and feeling deeply connected to source, sort of an altered state experience. Can we all bring these ideas into our work so we can be ultra creative? Now, that's the first pillar.
So let me ask you a question for people who are watching this right now, and I just want to make sure I could, I'm going to just turn off comments for a moment just so I could just focus on this conversation with you. What would you say to the critic who's watching this and saying, "Oh, but I see on social media you have to work hard and you have to hustle."
Right.
Right. How does that relate to your?
So that is the second pillar. Okay. The second pillar that makes the Buddha show up at work is not only are they tapped into intuition, so life is easier because you make better decisions, but they observe a philosophy or they observe an idea called bending reality. Now, I use the word bending reality to describe those beautiful moments. And if you're watching this, ask yourself, have you ever experienced those moments where you feel almost, wow, the universe has my back? I'm seeing synchronicity. I'm seeing magic. Life is just unfolding perfectly. Another example of bending reality is you lose something. Maybe a relationship's failed. Maybe your health fails. Maybe a business fails. But in that failure, there is an emergence of something even greater. For example, you might fail at a business, only to be spurred on to start the next business, which is where your true destiny lies. All of this is like an invisible hand guiding you. Again, our mutual friend Sri Kumar Rao calls it living in a benevolent universe, understanding that the universe is actually moving us along. But many of us don't see what is happening as the universe guiding us. Sri Kumar Rao, and you remember Sri Kumar, right? We have all shared the stage many times. He says, can you imagine a child being forced by their parents to eat vegetables? And the child is miserable. Why do I have to eat that broccoli? But when the child grows up and the child gets wiser, the child understands why the parents made them eat that vegetable. So all of these moments where a business might fail, or a career might dip, or we get fired, or we lose our job. What if that's simply a broccoli moment, or an asparagus moment, or a lettuce moment, or a spinach moment? The universe is feeding you a vegetable because there's something you have to go through that's unpleasant, because it is going to make your life become so much better in the future. So that's the second principle. Bending reality means you're able to activate magic. But not only are you able to activate magic, but the road bumps in life, you understand that they are there by design.
Mm. And then what would the next principle be from there, once you have those first two principles?
So the book is about 9 different practices to help bring these 2 things into your life. But these 2 things are really powerful. Mm-hmm. Who do you think, Jim, is the highest rated CEO in the world if you poll the global population?
Who's that going to be?
Steve Jobs, right? Now, let's look at Steve Jobs. Do you remember Steve Jobs? And I'm sure everyone viewing has heard of Steve Jobs' famous Stanford commencement address. I think it was 2005, and he said, listen to your heart and intuition. They somehow already know who you are meant to become. And if you read the biography of Steve Jobs by Walter Isaacson literally said, Steve Jobs believed in prana, or an intuitive way of understanding the world. He believed that the great sages and saints and mystics of India had a special ability, and he was one of them. Now, also in that book, 3 times, you will see the word bend reality mentioned in reference to Steve Jobs. I started using that word, bending reality, in my writing way back around 2008, 2009. When Walter Isaacson's book on Steve Jobs came out in 2011, the word bend reality is used 3 times in the book. Steve Jobs practiced this to a large degree. And even when he went through failure, remember there was a moment when he was kicked out of Apple, and then he tried to start a company called Next Computers, and that failed, and everyone said, well, this is the end of Steve Jobs. What happened from that? He started Pixar. He literally accidentally bought a company that became Pixar, which was sold to Disney for $7 billion, and today Jobs' family is the biggest shareholder in Disney. And then he was invited back to Apple. What if Pixar, the failure of Next Computers, him being kicked out of Apple, was his asparagus moment? Asparagus. So you see, when you tie these ideas together as a CEO, as a business leader, remarkable things can happen. And one can truly, truly transform their life in a big, big, big way.
So you're looking at these challenges, these 2 points, as potential vegetable moments.
Right.
And you're looking at through these filters. How does surrender, or how are you defining surrender, or how does that play into your work? When you use words like intuition, it's not common nomenclature in a corporate environment.
Right. And so this book is written in code. Okay, so I want to explain that. Firstly, 2 unique things about the Buddha and the Badass. Number 1, we write things in code. So we are talking about advanced spiritual ideas, but I write it in a way where business people would embrace it, because many CEOs, many bosses want to pass this book around to their employees, and not everyone may be ready to believe this if you use the common traditional language. For example, I don't talk about waking psychic ability, I talk about intuition. So you got to write in a gentle code that's acceptable to people, right? So that's the first thing. Now the second thing is basically this: you don't have to read the book in order. You read the introduction, then you decide what chapter most matters to you, and you dive in. And you know who I learned that from? You, in your speed reading program.
Okay.
Right? I remember we were talking and you said you don't necessarily read a book chapter by chapter. You will jump into the chapter that best resonates to you. So I thought, well, I want to write this book for Jim Kwik readers.
You want to do that.
I'm not just saying that. I literally, it was that conversation with you that made me write a book where every chapter is independent from every chapter. Okay, so those are two unique qualities in the book. Now, what the book tries to do is it teaches you 9 different principles all across these 9 chapters. You can dive into any chapter you want to unlock that inner Buddha to complement your badass.
What would you say as people are watching this, and they're just joining us? I'm with Vishen Lakhiani, the founder of Mind Valley, the New York Times bestselling author of The Code of the Extraordinary Mind, new book, The Buddha and the Badass. What would you say, do you think, going through the book is an idea that might, as people are reading it or listening to it, that might be more powerful than people think. You know what I mean? That they gloss over
Right.
that
Right.
concept, and it's
So,
right there.
So the idea which I think is really more powerful than people think is the idea of identifying your seed. So in the book, it's in chapter 1. I call it Finding Your Soul Print. So I learned this idea from a Syrian refugee, literally a Syrian refugee, a guy by the name of Dreamer Starlight. He was a blogger who would write a blog about the Syrian government back when Syria, sorry, not Syria, what am I saying? Sudan. He was a Sudanese refugee. So he was a blogger who would write a blog about the Sudanese government and the atrocities they were committing back before the revolution, back when the Sudanese government was really corrupt. Sudan was run by a dictator. And so back then he had a different name, Amir. And Amir was a freedom fighter. Now Amir moved to Malaysia at the age of 22. We met and he ended up joining Mind Valley. And while at Mind Valley, he continued running this blog. And it got so popular, he got asked to write a book. So he wrote a book that went massive. And before he knew it, Amir at 28 was speaking at the Oslo Freedom Forum. He was being flown around the world. He was invited to speak at Harvard and other major universities. And of course, this really pissed off the Sudanese government. And so he had to flee Malaysia to go to a safe place. He sought asylum in Canada. There's this wonderful man, 29 years old, showed up in Canada, put his passport on the immigration counter. Canada embraced him, and now he is a writer, thinker in Canada who goes by the name Dreamer Starlight. Now, Dreamer came back to visit Malaysia, in 2016, and we met up for coffee, and he said, Vishen, you're running your company all wrong. And I said, Amir, come on, you worked for me, but 8 years ago, like surely you don't see the big picture. And he said, no, let me tell you what I've learned. As I've traveled the world, as I've worked with Nobel Prize winners and all of these luminaries, I've learned that every single one of us, within us, has a seed. The seed is planted by the soul of the universe. Whatever you want to call it, God, higher intelligence, there's a reason a soul was put in your body, Vishen, in your body, Jim, in the body of the people here who are listening. That soul is a spark of God, and that soul is craving certain experiences in the world. And I said, okay, tell me more. And he says, and that soul stands for something. I call it the seed. Now, the thing is, if you're building any business, if you're writing a book, if you're starting a company, it's important for you to understand that your soul wants your seed to be embedded in this creation. But most people fail to do that. And he said, Vishen, you've started Mind Valley, but what are Mind Valley's values? And I said, we have this list of 10 values. And he said, who developed that values? And I said, well, I did a process with my team in 2008. I got everybody to write down their values. I compiled it together, and boom, I created a set of like values. And he goes, no, that's corporate rubbish. You don't do that. He says, Mind Valley was, he said, by the way, you didn't create Mind Valley. None of us who creates anything of massive value, the book, the company, it is not by you, it is from you. Rather, the universe chose you to create something. You want to honor that. But you have to recognize that there is a spark of you that has to go in it, and that spark comes from your seed, and it's already embedded in you. So Amir made me do an exercise, and I still have that piece of paper here on my desk. I grabbed this piece of paper, right? And he made me draw a series of columns, and he said, I want you to tell me about these moments in your life, your highs and your lows. He's going to call it your peaks and your pain. So I spoke to Amir. I remembered my highs and my lows. Growing up in Malaysia with a dad who was starting a business, with a mother who was a school teacher. I talked about my lows, experiencing racism in a really bad way. And as we went through that, Amir made me make a list of values, things that I really believed in. And I'm using the word values here usually. Really, it's things that resonate with me in my core. And I put down things such as growth, learning, transformation, love, compassion, healing the world, unity. And as we started going through these, he made me cluster them into little clusters. And I identified 3 clusters. The first cluster is envisioning. That's the engineer in me. That is the builder, the creator. The second cluster is transformation. That's the personal growth junkie in me. You see all those books behind my shelf? The only thing I read are transformation books. And the final cluster is unity. Because, as you know my story, Jim, I was living in America, but because I was born in Malaysia after September 11, life got really hard because there was an immigration process called special registration. And if you were born in a Muslim country, you couldn't live life normally. You had to report to the government every 4 weeks. You couldn't use certain flights. I couldn't get on a plane without a 2-hour interview. And so I had to leave America because living in America was like living on parole, even though at my heart, I'm still American, and I still am today. So that gave me my third value, unity, which is healing the world across all cultures, all religions, all skin colors, and really standing up for human diversity and unity. So Amir said, that's it, Vishen. That is your seed. Now what you need to do is change the entire business so that 3 values are what is embedded in mind value, and watch what will happen. So I went back and I told my team, look, we're no longer going to follow the code of awesomeness, which was wonderful in a way. It was our set of company values, but it was too fluffy. We're going to change this entire company to focus on unity. We're going to focus on transformation. We're going to focus on envisioning and creating. And you know what happened next, Jim? Because we were focused on transformation, we decided we will study the programs we bring in. We will expand our portfolio of authors. We will go from just being a small meditation company to expanding. You were one of the first people we brought in. If you remember, we met in LA in 2016, a few months actually after I met Amir. And you were one of the first big teachers to come to Mind Valley. Now, the program you created was a new type of learning, Quest. Quest came from my value of envisioning. Envisioning means to create. And you'll notice if you've worked with my team, they come from 60 different countries. That's unity. We are driven to unite the world. So by understanding my values, I plugged them in my business. And Mind Valley we grew by 5 times in the next 4 years, between 2016 and 2020. 5 times growth, 5x growth. And we were stagnating for a while. I'll admit it, we were failing in 2015 and 2016. By failing, I mean we were losing money, and we were just kind of stagnating. Now, is it this value model? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe it's all a coincidence. But I know this. Today, I live my life by these 3 seeds. They are in everything I do. If you walk into my house, you see loads and loads of bookshelves of transformation. If you walk into my company, you see people from all across the world. If you see what I do on a daily basis, I'm creating and creating and creating. That's envisioning. Now, all of us have that. When we put that in our company, in our personal brand, we become unique. You could decide you want to start a cupcake business. Okay, great. There are many different cupcake businesses in the world. But if you can identify what is your seed, and remember that seed may come from a moment of a peak moment, some beautiful moment from your past, but it could also come from pain. Maybe as a young person, you experience cruelty, abuse, or bullying. Okay, so that becomes part of your seed. Your seed is to reverse that. So you decide that your seed is going to be kindness and compassion. That's it. That's what you're going to stand for. Now, what this means is you got to inject that in your cupcake business. Your cupcake business, you might decide that you want to give it a name, Kindness Cupcakes, or you want to infuse the atmosphere of the space with kindness. Or when somebody, or when you're given a cupcake as a customer, there's a little note that says, "We love you," next to it. Now, when you do that, what you will find is that you activate magic. You will find that because you are living life in accordance with your seed, which is why your universe put you here, life suddenly becomes easy. But more than that, you become magnetic. People gravitate to you. They gravitate to your business. Now, when you do this exercise, something interesting happens. You think back of the abuse that you experienced as a child, and you realize, what do you realize? It was a vegetable moment.
Asparagus.
It was your soul giving you momentary pain so you can find your true destiny. You see, our pain is often the breadcrumbs to our destiny. And that's what the first chapter of the book is about. It's about discovering that soul print and using it to magnify your work and your business and what you do.
And then you take that seed and you take care of it as you would, because what you nourish flourishes. Vishen
You have to
Lakhiani,
live by it, right?
live by
You
it.
have to live by it, right?
I feel you. How do people who are watching and listening right now, and I mean, that's just the first part of the book, how do they find out more?
Well, go to mindvalley.com/Buddha Badass. BUDDHA Badass. Go to mindvalley.com/Buddha Badass. You can buy the book there and unlock a whole range of bonuses. You can also go straight to Barnes & Noble's, Amazon, but then return to mindvalley.com/Buddha Badass to get the bonuses. Now, the other thing that's really cool is that if you buy 5 copies of the book, so if you have 5 copies, you have copies you can give a friend. But what happens then is that my new program on Mind Valley, Be Extraordinary at Work, you get that completely free. That's like a $4.99 program, but we're giving it completely free just this week until Saturday for people who support the launch of the book by buying 5 copies. So again, it's mindvalley.com/Buddha Badass.
Amazing. Vishen Lakhiani, I recommend everybody check out the book and take a screenshot, as we often do for these podcast episodes. You can tag myself, tag Vishen, and post what you think your seed is. What do you think?
I'm holding up the book for your screenshot.
Yeah. And then you could share what you believe is the seed in your soul print.
Right.
Vishen, congratulations again on this on this book. I'm looking forward to hearing all of the amazing stories that come out of this. And thank you. I believe the life you live are the lessons you teach. And so
thank you, Jim.
Appreciate the way.
I appreciate you.
Yes, my friend. So everybody, thank you for listening to this episode, and make sure you share it as always. And I'll put all the links, as we always do, in our podcast notes at jimkwik.com/notes. And here we go. Vishen Lakhiani, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Bye, Jim.
Bye, buddy.